I wanted to welcome all of you to this beautiful practice that we've created for ourselves over the past few weeks. Most of us find ourselves in familiar surroundings. We might find ourselves in our home environment or work environment, taking a break during lunchtime to embark on this practice together. And so those of you who usually join me in the little red room at the Buddhist temple, we usually spend the first few minutes arriving in our little room, which is of course a different space from your home. It's a different space from your workplace. But today's practice is a little bit different, isn't it? Because we find ourselves in familiar surroundings. And so I'm going to ring the bell again. And this bell is going to symbolize the end of one segment in our day. So we're going to create a doorway using this bell, because I'm sure a lot happened, even though we've only been awake for 5, 6 hours, 7 hours. Much might have happened this morning in each and every one of your lives. And then of course there's what happened yesterday and day before and the weeks before that, the months, the years before that. Sometimes we're still carrying all of that with us, aren't we? We're carrying them in our mind. And so when I ring the bell, we'll step into this new moment, this new segment in our day where maybe at this point we'll identify what our intention is for this hour that we spend together. One thing I know that I would like to do, and perhaps one of the reasons I created this space, is just so that we can step outside of all those thoughts that we have. Give ourselves some true rest, some relief from the constant thinking, the planning, sometimes the worrying. And this seems so much more relevant these days. I know some of you are probably thinking, when are we going to start the meditation? When are we going to start the practice? But this is the practice. I'm gently going to talk you into the practice. Because this is a practice which we use in almost every aspect of our life, in our relationships, in our work, the way in which we care for our partners, our children, our pets, the conversations we have. And that's what we're having right now. We're having a sort of conversation. And I'd like to invite you to simply be aware of how your ears receive these sounds which are coming out of my lips from my vocal cords. And so the practice begins here, awareness. And so when you hear the bell, it's going to be the beginning of a new segment in our day. We were speaking about what our intention is for these moments that we spend together. So then one of those intentions is to give ourselves some rest from the constant chatter of the mind. Because almost certainly as we sit here, I know most of us are fairly still in our bodies. And so the body is resting. And if you like, if you think your body is not rested enough, you can loosen some of those tight muscles that you find within your body, your shoulders, your arms, your back. And so it's fairly easy to rest the body, isn't it? This practice is about resting the mind, and in addition to the body. And so that's one of the reasons we're here. And then maybe another reason would be to just simply sit and breathe. And so that's a very simple thing. If you like, you could just focus on sitting and breathing, because we all know how to sit. We all know how to breathe. And so we release those labels that we've come to know as meditation. We release the need to meditate. We release the need to be mindful, because all of these are simply labels. And each one of us arrives into this space with different ideas as to what meditation means. We've all read many books. We've looked at statues of yogis and Buddhas, and then we've somehow managed to create expectations as to what meditation is, what the practice of mindfulness is. And so we arrive in this part of the day, into this moment. So we've come here to sit. We've come here to breathe. So we won't worry too much about stepping outside of the thought process for now. That will come. That will come once we remind ourselves how to sit and breathe. Let's begin with sitting, shall we? Something we've been doing for a very, very long time, since we were children. What does it feel like to be seated here in front of your computer, in front of your device, in front of your phone? What are the sensations that you can experience? The points of contact. Which parts of your body are in contact with the surface? If you're seated on a chair, the soles of your feet might be touching the carpet or the flooring. Maybe through a pair of socks. We're looking for those little details, every little sensation. And then whether you're sitting on a mat, a cushion, a mattress, a chair, how that surface is supporting your body. Of course, if it's a soft surface, you will find it molding to the shape of your body, supporting you, giving you that extra bit of comfort. And then there is the posture, the body's posture, the shape the body is taking. The spinal column, the shoulders, the neck, and how the neck supports the head. Are you beginning to get a feel for what it feels like to be sitting? Of course, some of you might be lying down, and that's absolutely fine. So you would be getting the sensations associated with your body lying down on whatever surface you find yourself on. And now we explore the surface around our body, the temperature of the space that we find ourselves in at this moment. And the beautiful thing about a practice such as this is that each and every one of us is experiencing something completely unique, depending on whether or not your window's open, your heating is on or off, the texture of your clothing, its thickness or its thinness, the fabric. And let's tune ourselves into this temperature, the sensations that we may be experiencing right now as we sit here, adding this new dimension to this experience we call sitting. And so even though we've been sitting for many, many years, since the day we were born, perhaps even from the point we were babies, learning to sit up, we're introducing something new into our practice today, and that's simply the fact that we're increasing our level of awareness. We're consciously sitting, experiencing these different sensations. And then there's something that's undeniable about this moment, isn't it? And that would be the sounds around us. Again, we've got different temperatures. And then we've got different sounds around us, very specific sounds. Even the sound of silence is a sound, without which no other sound would be audible. What can you hear right now at this moment? Because this is a practice where we very gradually and very gently practice making peace with this present moment. Are there any sounds around you, or perhaps even sounds around me, because I'm the only one with the microphone on, that might be disturbing or interrupting your practice? The sound of a neighbor's footsteps, the sound of somebody moving furniture, traffic, the voice of somebody in the distance on a street outside your window. Which, if any of these sounds, might be distracting or disturbing your practice? And if there are any sounds that are disturbing or disrupting your practice, this is a strange practice, because you will thank that disturbance, that interruption. And the reason you would do this is because the world is giving you a tool with which to practice with. Because to many teachers, many facilitators, they define this practice as the art of allowing. It's an art, and it's about allowing. And what are you allowing? You are allowing all that you find in this particular moment in time, this now, where you can hear my voice and whatever else you can hear. And if you find yourself being disturbed by a particular sound or a particular group of sounds, that is simply an indication that we are not allowing it. We are pushing against that particular sound. And what the mind might be saying is that I want you to go away. I mean, that particular sound, if it's a footstep, if it's a voice, go away. I'm supposed to be meditating. And so a whole dialogue begins, a whole story begins within the mind where it's chatting and trying to pretend that the sound isn't there. And then the mind begins moving, the momentum begins, and a whole dialogue, a whole script unfolds. Like one of those scripts you see in the theater or in a cinema. But we're here to practice allowing, and so what if we gave that sound permission to exist? I allow you to be. Not going to push against you. How does this change our experience of this sound? It may not make much of a difference right now, but this is a practice where we're beginning to understand this art of allowing. And even if you don't find yourself completely at peace, you might find yourself feeling a little bit better. Once you acknowledge it, once you give it permission to be, you might even say things to the mind such as, that they don't know that we're here doing this practice. And if they knew we were embarking on this practice, they would be so much more quieter. And that might soothe the mind a little bit, and then it'll enter into a deeper state of allowing. You might be wondering why, especially if your surroundings are completely quiet, if you're surrounded in absolute silence, you might be wondering, what's the relevance of this to me? What's the relevance of this particular practice to me right now? Because everything's so perfect, everything's so quiet. But that's just an example of how we also enter into the relationship with our mind. And if you like, we can bring our attention to the mind right now, because a moment ago we focused, at least for the last few moments, we've been noticing where our body is sitting. In many ways, we arrived into this space where we find ourselves sitting and breathing. Our body is relatively still. And so the vessel, this container that we call the body, is now relatively still. Now let's look at the contents, and let's consider the mind to be the main ingredient within this form. For most of us, we would have noticed that the mind is still moving. Whether it's caught up in some of those sounds around you, or it might be remembering one of those events from our past. And then for others, we have very busy lives, don't we? And so it's making plans, it's thinking about all those things you have to do and hopefully you'd like to do later on today. And so we find ourselves very present in this moment, but from this moment thinking about the past or the future. And this is where it becomes relevant to the practice about sounds. Because remember we said that this practice is called the art of allowing. And so in the same way, earlier we entered into this practice and we said, I'm here to do some form of meditation, and so I associate absolute silence with meditation. And so all those voices, those footsteps, the car alarm going off next door, those are interrupting and disrupting my practice. But then we learned to begin the process of allowing. And now, with the focus on the mind, many of us often think that meditation means there must be absolute silence within the mind. And very often we take it to mean that we must wrestle against our thoughts, stop our thoughts. I'm sure you've all been to one of those meditation sessions where it begins with, okay, now still the thoughts, stop the mind. And then you find that you're not meditating because you're continuing to think. And so just as we learnt to allow the sounds, let's, for a brief few moments, give permission for our thoughts, for our mind to think. We enter into a state of allowing. I give you permission. This somehow comes from a slightly deeper understanding that the mind has its own momentum. And so each and every one of us here, we've had challenges in our past. We've had conversations. We've sometimes disagreed. Sometimes, more often than not, we've disagreed with other people about certain subjects. And of course, we've listened to the news. We've unwittingly opened up social media messages that paint very bleak and scary images of the future. And each and every one of these memories and anticipations they've all contributed to this momentum of the mind. And so the mind is moving and it's moving and it's moving. And I know for myself, yes, I have experienced stress. I have experienced worry. I have experienced concerns. And I'm sure each and every one of you has also experienced some worry, some concern. And that's only an indication that we have identified ourselves with our mind. And so we've all at some point in our life identified ourselves with our mind. And this is a practice where we, no matter what's happening in the mind, no matter what its concerns are, no matter what its momentum is, it's a practice where we learn how to gently step outside of those thoughts so that our thoughts become something quite separate from that which we believed ourselves to be. And stepping outside of our thoughts is what happens when we tap into this present moment that we call our now. And so bring yourself back to your bodies so that you once again experience yourselves sitting here, yourselves breathing, your temperature, the points of contact between your body and the surfaces around and underneath it. It feels quite still, doesn't it? And what has happened is that we've shifted our identification from the mind into this witnessing presence, this space that exists around the thoughts. It's a little bit of a difficult concept to grasp, isn't it? And for those of us, even myself, I like to very often use images, metaphors to help me understand this process a little bit better. And so if you can imagine in your mind's eye, let's use our mind for a change. We've been talking about stepping outside of the thoughts, stepping outside of the mind. But for a brief few moments, why don't we use our mind and bring into our thoughts the image of the sky with its clouds. Each and every one of us will be seeing a different image in our heads, but they're all right. Every single one of these images. And these clouds that we see in the sky, let these clouds represent our thoughts. And if you can imagine yourself right in the middle of one of these thoughts, right in the middle of one of these clouds, identifying yourself as the cloud, believing yourself to be the cloud. And so the cloud, it's moving from the past, and then it's moving into the future. And it's very hazy, isn't it? You can't see very clearly. Perhaps you can't even breathe very clearly because it's so dense sometimes. And sometimes these clouds, they turn into very stormy clouds, gray clouds, and they can feel very scary when there's the sound of thunder and flashes of lightning coming out of them. Very confusing, very scary, worry, fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, those things from the past, those anticipations from the future. We all know what that's felt like. And then we're going to bring ourselves back into our bodies, into this present moment, where you begin to notice as you look up into the clouds. So right now we find ourselves in this present moment, which is outside of that past, which is outside of that future, into this moment. And as you look at these clouds, they look very different, don't they? Each and every one of them has a different shape, a different form. And instead of moving with the clouds, you find yourself quite well grounded into this moment. And so the clouds continue to move. The thoughts continue to move, but there is stillness. There is that silence. And then you begin to notice the gaps in between the clouds. Because it's never a continuous cloud, is it? Even if you have to wait hours sometimes, a gap will always appear. And what this practice is about, at least in the beginning, is coming out of the cloud, coming out of the center of the cloud into these gaps in between the clouds, where you begin to notice the form of the clouds, still very close to the sound of the thunder and the flashes of lightning, but still separate, still getting a little bit wet from the moisture of those water particles. And then the practice continues as we sit here, as we breathe. And then we begin to notice there is space not only in between the clouds, but there's a lot more space underneath the clouds. And then we begin to feel a little bit more free, because we know we can distance ourselves that little bit more from these clouds, these thoughts, these emotions, whatever it is you want to call them. And soon you begin to recognize the space above the clouds. And here it seems almost limitless. I don't know what your image looks like, whether it's daytime or it's nighttime. Obviously, you might see deep blue skies, or you might see the dark of the night with its millions and trillions of stars and different galaxies and systems out there. And then you've created a little bit more space because of your practice. And then why don't we move into this a little bit deeper into this space? Into some of those systems, into some of those galaxies. Looking outward, moving deeper and deeper into this space until we decide we would now like to look back at the clouds, which have suddenly become extremely small, minuscule. But as we look back, now that we have somehow managed to create space and distance between ourselves, our witnessing selves, and these thoughts, these clouds, these different forms. Sometimes you may notice solutions to some of the challenges that earlier did not seem accessible at all from within the clouds. Now you see the solutions. You see the answers. And then you begin to recognize that in this space, outside of thoughts, it's where you also find kindness. And so these solutions, these responses, more often than not, they are filled with understanding, filled with patience, where from within the clouds you wanted solutions immediately. And sometimes it involved a great deal of pushing, a great deal of effort, a great deal of doing. But as you step back into this space, it's a state of being where there's very little to do. But from this space of wisdom, from this space of kindness, what you do need to do is a lot more clearer and a lot more effective. And that is what this practice is about. It's about stepping outside of the usual patterns, the usual habits which we have been almost constantly practicing throughout our lives. A whole set of reactions. Maybe with that particular person, every time the person says that same thing, we react in the exact same way. Two bulls charging against each other. Never a solution, is there? This is a practice where we step outside of those habits, those reactions, which seem so automatic, and settle into this moment. Where there is less effort, less to do, because whatever we do, whenever we do speak or act, it is so much more effective. Please give yourself permission to stretch your bodies, to do anything at all that would help you to feel that little bit more comfortable. And of course, if sitting exactly as you are is what you'd like to continue doing, then please continue. In this final few minutes that we have together, we'll do a short practice for our immune system, shall we? Because I'm sure you've all, through the articles and the books and the speeches that you've listened to, you've heard many facilitators speak about the connection between meditation and mindfulness and well-being and health. And so in this final part, we'll simply allow our immune systems to resurface. Every worry, every upsetting thought that we keep with us from the past, all those different things we have to do which create stress in our lives. We somehow manage to store it within our bodies, and that's how dis-ease arises. That word disease is taken from the word dis-ease. At least I think it is. And what we're going to practice now is I'm going to take you through different parts of the body where you just experience that particular part of the body from within, from around it, the skin, the muscles, and in whatever way you would like to. We're going to release little intentions to ease that part of the body, to release any of this stress, tension, and worry that we may be keeping within it. And who are we releasing it to? back to our immune systems, so that the immune systems can once again resurface, repair, heal, protect, and most importantly, protect. And so let's begin from the tops of our heads, the scalp. And if you're more a visual person, then imagine this awareness as a warm and soothing light that's bathing the skin around the scalp. And as you feel this light fall upon your skin, feel your skin relax itself, loosen itself. And then feel it gravitate inwards through the skull and into that space where the brain sits. In your mind's eye, imagining the brain, the whole brain, filling up with this comforting light that relaxes, that oozes with ease. This light of awareness spreading into the ears, the eyes, letting go. The facial muscles, the teeth, the mouth and the lips, experiencing what your facial expression is, perhaps for the very first time from within, not through a mirror, through what you imagine your face to look like, but from within, in its perfection. And when I say perfection, some of you might be finding that a little bit difficult, just because of all those images we have in our mind as to what our faces should or should not look like. But we remind ourselves that in this practice, we step into this present moment. And the beauty about being only in this moment is that you have nothing to compare yourself, your face, your body, your achievements, your bank balance. You have nothing to compare it against, because there is only this moment. No memories, no standards, either from the past or from the future. You become perfect in every conceivable way. This light of awareness spreading inwards, bathing the inner parts of the earlobes, the mouth, the jawbone resting and relaxing, spreading down into the neck muscles, exploring the windpipe where you can experience your breath moving up and down the throat. This light of awareness inching its way into the shoulders, finding your shoulder muscles relaxing themselves, loosening themselves, perhaps even falling under the weight of your arms. Spreading down into the arms, the elbow, the wrist, tips of the fingers, aware of the weight of your arms, the positioning of your arms, relaxing all the various muscles you find within. Through the chest, the upper back, all the vital organs in between and within the upper body. Light of awareness gravitating downwards through the mid-regions, the stomach where the digestive system is, observing and noticing the rising and the falling of the stomach wall as you breathe. Inching its way downwards through the thighs, of course through the whole pelvic region, into the knees, the calves, the shin, ankles and feet, soles of the feet, all the way down to the toes. Sitting in this moment where we started, breathing, aware of the sensations that you can experience around every breath that flows in and out. Curious about the temperature of the air as it flows in, the temperature as it flows out. Breathing in this light so that this light of awareness, together with the oxygen that your breath brings in, travels through the bloodstreams into every cell of your body, relaxing, releasing, soothing and comforting. Once again, that word allowing, but this time allowing of the immune system to simply resurface like a balloon that's been held under water, waiting to resurface, completely releasing and letting go. I won't say anything for a few moments, but I would like to invite you to simply explore what it feels like to just sit and breathe. Nothing else to do. Just being. With the sound of the bell, we can bring our practice, hopefully, to our beautiful practice. I really enjoyed it, to a very gentle and mindful close. And I want to thank all of you for joining me once again. Thank you so much.